Imagine holding a winning lottery ticket worth $1 trillion and throwing it in the trash. Not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. This is the reality of a company that once defined what the internet was. Before Google, before Facebook, and before the smartphone, there was just one name that mattered. It was the homepage of the world. It was the first site you visited when you dialed up your modem. It was the gatekeeper of the digital age. Today, we are talking about Yahoo. But this isn't just a story about a website that got old and died. This is a story about the single greatest streak of bad decision-making in the history of capitalism. This is the story of how a company had the chance to buy Google for $1 million and said no. How they had the chance to buy Facebook for $1 billion and messed it up over a rounding error. And how they eventually turned down a $44 billion buyout offer from Microsoft, only to sell themselves years later for pennies on the dollar. Welcome to Tech Lore. Today, we are exploring the $1 trillion mistake in exactly how Yahoo lost the internet. To understand the magnitude of this collapse, we have to go back to a time when the internet was the Wild West. The year is 1994. 2. Stanford University electrical engineering students, Jerry Yang and David Philo, were bored. They weren't trying to build a business empire. They were just trying to keep track of their favorite websites. At the time, there was no Google. There were no algorithms. If you wanted to find a website, you had to know the address, or you had to find a list. So, Jerry and David made a list. They called it Jerry and David's Guide to the World Wide Web. It was a directory, organized by categories like sports, news, and finance. It was manual. It was human-curated. And it was exactly what the early internet needed. They renamed it Yahoo, which stood for yet another hierarchical, officious oracle. It exploded. In the mid-90s, if you were online, you were on Yahoo. They weren't just a search engine. They were the portal. They provided your email, your news, your stock quotes, and your chat rooms. By the time they went public in 1996, Yahoo wasn't just a tech company. It was a cultural phenomenon. Their stock price skyrocketed during the dot-com boom, creating millionaires overnight. At its peak, in the year 2000, Yahoo was worth $125 billion. They were the kings of the internet. But heavy is the head that wears the crown, and inside the palace, the cracks were already forming. The first and most fatal mistake happened in 1998. 2 other Stanford students walked into Yahoo's offices. Their names were Larry Page and Sergey Brin. They had developed a new way to search the internet. Unlike Yahoo, which relied on humans to categorize websites, their system used a mathematical algorithm to rank pages based on relevance. They called it PageRank. Larry and Sergey wanted to get back to their studies, so they offered to sell their little project to Yahoo. The price tag was just $1 million. Yahoo turned them down. But the reason why they turned them down is the critical part of this lore. It wasn't that Yahoo didn't have the money. It was that Yahoo didn't understand the business of search. In 1998, Yahoo wanted you to stay on Yahoo. They were a media company. They sold banner ads. The longer you stayed on their page, the more money they made. Larry and Sergey's invention was designed to send you away from the website as fast as possible to find what you were looking for. To Yahoo executives, a good search engine was actually bad for business. They told the Google founders to get lost. Larry and Sergey went on to found Google, effectively forcing Yahoo to compete with a monster they could have owned for pocket change. But the story gets worse. Fast forward to 2002. The dot-com bubble has burst, but Yahoo survived. Google is now gaining traction, and Yahoo executives realize they made a mistake. They decide they need to buy Google before it gets too big. The CEO of Yahoo at the time, Terry Semel, arranges a meeting. He sits down with Larry and Sergey. The Google founders are hesitant, but they give him a number. They say they will sell Google to Yahoo for $3 billion. Terry Semel thinks that is too expensive. He hesitates. He waits. By the time he comes back to the table, Google's valuation has grown. Larry and Sergey raise the price to $5 billion. Semel says no. He thinks it is an absurd evaluation for a search engine. Today, Google's parent company, Alphabet, is worth nearly $2 trillion. Yahoo missed the boat not once, but twice. If you are enjoying this deep dive into the history of tech failures, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We are building a library of business lore, and you do not want to miss the next episode after missing out on Google. You would think Yahoo would have learned a lesson about recognizing potential, but history has a funny way of repeating itself. In 2006, a new phenomenon was taking over college campuses. It was called Facebook. Yahoo saw the potential of social media and moved quickly. They approached a 22-year-old Mark Zuckerberg. At the time, Facebook had a few million users, and many people thought it was just a fad. Yahoo offered $1 billion in cash to buy the company. This is one of the most famous what-if moments in tech history. Mark Zuckerberg and his board were actually planning to accept the offer. $1 billion was an unimaginable amount of money for a college dropout. But then the stock market took a slight dip. Yahoo's stock price fell, and CEO Terry Semel decided to get clever. He lowered the offer from $1 billion to $850 million. He thought Zuckerberg would have no choice but to take it. He was wrong. Mark Zuckerberg was insulted. He tore up the term sheet in the board meeting and walked away. Months later, Yahoo tried to go back to the original offer of $1 billion, but it was too late. The price had gone up, and Facebook was never for sale again. These two missed acquisitions are tragic, but they are only half the story. The other half is what Yahoo actually did with the money they had. They spent billions buying companies that they had no idea how to manage. In 1999, they bought HTTP search Q equals broadcast.com from Mark Cuban for $5.7 billion. It was a service for listening to radio over the internet. It was one of the most expensive acquisitions of the decade. Within a few years, Yahoo shut it down completely. It was a $5 billion bonfire. They bought GeoCities, the beloved home of personal websites, and let it rot until they shut it down. They bought Flickr, which was the Instagram of its day, failed to innovate on mobile, allowing Instagram to eat their lunch. Asterisk. The core problem was an identity crisis. Yahoo never knew what it wanted to be. Was it a tech company? Or was it a media company? Google knew it was a tech company. They hired the best engineers in the world and built scalable code. Yahoo hired media executives from Hollywood. They treated the internet like television. They focused on producing content, flashy front pages, and exclusive partnerships. While their underlying technology crumbled, their code became a mess of patches and duct tape. Good engineers didn't want to work there because the culture was focused on ad sales. It's not innovation. By 2008, the walls were closing in. Google had one search. Facebook was winning social. Yahoo was stagnant. But they had one final lifeline. Microsoft, seeing the dominance of Google, wanted to merge with Yahoo to create a competitor. Steve Ballmer, the CEO of Microsoft, offered to buy Yahoo for $44 billion. It was a generous offer. It was a premium on their stock price. It was an exit strategy that would have saved investors billions. And what did Yahoo do? The co-founder, Jerry Yang, who had returned as CEO, said no. He believed Yahoo was worth more. He believed they could turn it around. He famously wrote a letter to shareholders saying the offer substantially undervalued the company. Microsoft withdrew the offer. The stock price of Yahoo immediately collapsed. They had turned down $44 billion based on pride and delusion. The final chapter of Yahoo's independence is perhaps the most confusing. In 2012, they hired Marissa Mayer as CEO. She was a superstar executive from Google. One of the first employees there. The media loved her. The narrative was perfect. The Google genius comes to save the dying giant. She tried to pivot the company to mobile. She bought Tumblr for $1.1 billion, promising not to screw it up. She famously spent heavily on content, hiring news anchors like Katie Couric on massive contracts. She tried to make Yahoo cool again. But you cannot fix a broken foundation with a fresh coat of paint. The Tumblr acquisition was a disaster. The user base hated the corporate takeover, and they left in droves. Yahoo eventually wrote off almost the entire value of Tumblr. Mayer's tenure was marked by confusing strategies. A controversial ban on remote work and a failure to catch up to the mobile revolution. While Google and Apple were defining the smartphone era, Yahoo was still trying to be a web portal. The end did not come with a bang, but with a whimper. In 2016, after years of declining revenue and data breaches that exposed billions of user accounts, Yahoo finally put itself up for sale. The company that once turned down $44 billion was sold to Verizon for just $4.8 billion. Think about that math. They could have owned Google. They could have owned Facebook. They could have sold for $44 billion. Instead, they sold for less than $5 billion. It is a destruction of value that is almost hard to comprehend. So what is the lesson of the Yahoo lore? It is a lesson about the danger of comfort. Yahoo was the king of the Web 1.0 era. They made so much money selling banner ads on their homepage that they stopped looking at the horizon. They thought they could dictate how people used the internet. They thought they could force people to stay on their portal. But technology does not care about your legacy. It only cares about utility. Google provided a better utility for search. Facebook provided a better utility for connection. Yahoo provided a cluttered homepage full of things nobody asked for. Today, the Yahoo brand still exists. You might even use it for finance news or fantasy sports. It is still a popular website, but it is a ghost of what it was supposed to be. It is a reminder that in the technology industry, the only constant is change. You are either innovating or you are dying. There is no middle ground. Yahoo spent 20 years trying to find the middle ground, and it cost them everything. If you look closely at the history of Silicon Valley, you will see that the graveyards are full of giants who refuse to adapt, but none of them had the golden tickets that Yahoo held in its hands. To hold the future of the internet in your palm and let it slip through your fingers 3 separate times requires a special kind of corporate dysfunction. And that is why Yahoo will always be remembered not for what they built, but for what they could have been. Thank you for watching this episode of Tech Lore if you found this story fascinating. We have plenty more deep dives coming up on the channels that shaped our digital world. The script for the next video is already being written, and trust me, you won't want to miss the story of how a fruit company became the most valuable entity on Earth. We will see you in the next one. Asterisk.